I found I was a bit clumsy changing discs, so I built this vinyl rack to help. It just sort of space saves and allows me to put the sleeve and the cover down while I'm manoeuvring the disc. I built this in the previous video out of some white oak, and I chose to do mited splined corner joints. Now if you've watched that video you'll know that in the middle I was very unhappy with how the project was progressing, but by the end I was reasonably comfortable with the sort of slightly shonky thing that I had produced. But I did make a redesign, which I'm going to show the build for in this video. The new design includes two identical wooden pieces, so my first step is to take this thin plywood and to make a template of the right dimensions that I think I want. This gives me an idea of what it's going to look like before I start cutting into the good wood, and the template allows me to trace out the two other pieces. So my instinct is to go there, but then I know that there's going to be a piece coming right through that then. So I'm deliberating here about where to place this template twice on this board, because it has a few knots and a split in it, which I need to avoid as best I can, or at least certainly make sure the split isn't at one of the key structural parts of this piece. After a while of puzzling over this, I realised that I really wanted to plane this piece, and by planing it I could see how bad the crack was, how deep it went into the wood. But it also occurred to me after laying out these pieces that when I plane it I was going to cause a bit of router snipe at the ends of the board that I might also want to avoid. So really I want to plane it before I mark out where this shape goes. So after many trips through the planer, I've discovered that the board, once it was the right thickness, the big crack I was worried about isn't too dramatic anymore and can be avoided. But there are some knots in the wood which will prove interesting, but I'm going to include them and see how they work. Now the board is the right thickness and I've marked out my two pieces. I'm just using the table saw here to trim the board down and remove the bulk of the waste material. I debated how to do these long internal cuts, and I decided to use the bandsaw here on the first pass. The angled cuts that I'm doing at the ends need to be nice and straight, and I need to be able to make a second parallel cut deeper into the C shape that remains, and you'll see why in a minute. I didn't get as good a cut as I was hoping actually off this bandsaw. I should probably have taken a bit more time to get it set up with guides, but it worked to remove the bulk of the material. Okay, so having carefully made a template, I then decided my template was too long, but I still used it to cut out these two pieces, which I then shaped on the bandsaw and the table saw. I've now decided I don't like these pieces either. I want these to be steeper, these cuts here, and I'm changing my manufacturing method here. I'm going to use my miter saw, which is a bit tricky because it's not a sliding miter saw, so I have to figure out the depth of my cut. I've bolted this board on here and made a test cut. I can see where the cut ends. The fact it's not actually vertical there is just something I need to work with. I have these lines on here, and I'm going to re-trim these to be steeper, and I also need to cut into this piece of wood here. Now this white line scored on the board here shows me how far I will not cut on this piece of wood. And looking at that now, that is alarming me a little. Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. Wood's strong, right? I would like to stack these up and cut them together. I will try that, but if it doesn't look like it's going to work, I'll abandon that and cut them individually. Can I live with that? It's cut away more material than I wanted, but it's not a bad cut. Now the tricky thing is these slots need to be a little bit wider, so I'm going to recut that, obviously from the same side, otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. If I cut this bit too wide, it's all for naught, it's all ruined. Okay. Wider. Yeah, that's about right. This is the perils of not having a sliding miter saw. I must admit, it's a steeper cut than I thought. I guess if it was further away, it would cut less steeply. Well, I'm kind of committed now. About perfect width slot, but it is quite ugly. Now I can reverse this to put the cuts on the inside, but it's a bit of a pain. Let's see. Okay, so I've reversed the setup here, cut the same angle in the other direction, flip the pieces over. So this side is going to be the bad side, the inside. I'm going to mark up two together and then take them off and cut them. Decided I don't like the boxiness of this front shape, so I'm going to cut it down, trim it down, and then sand it off. Bit of dust extraction, please. And now the excess is cut off, sand it to shape. I thought that might happen as I sanded closer and closer to that knot. Oh well, I quite like it. So if you remember earlier in the build, I cut these slots with the mitre saw, and I was expecting it to be an uneven cut deeper on one side than the other, but I wasn't expecting how uneven it was going to be. I completely misjudged the curve of that blade. Once this is assembled, you can't actually see these insides, but I know they're there. So what I've done is I have thinned and then cut these little triangles of wood, which I'm going to glue in here and then finish off, just to make it a little bit neater and maybe even a little bit stronger. Those little triangles to repair the inside edges here are now glued in and sanded back. Just noticed a mark on it. So now it's finishing time. I'm going to go straight for my default finishing, which is Danish oil on this white oak. And it will be interesting to see how the white oak, it'll be interesting to see how this Danish oil works on this burl at the front here. I've never had to deal with one of them before that's chipped out like this anyway. I don't quite know why I'm doing both at once. It's probably a bit foolish. I do like the richness. It's always nice to put this finish on. Plenty in here. So always as I put the finish on, I spot little bits that weren't quite evenly sanded. If you remember the original piece of wood, I had trouble cutting out these pieces from it once I planed it because of the huge crack around one part. But now that I'm finishing this up, I'm actually really quite enjoying this knotted wood. Quite liking that figure. Okay, I'm going to take those inside to cure off in the warm. Sorry, my 3D printer's just started up. We've finished the Danish oil on this oak, and now we're ready for final fitting, which is some felt feet, which won't take very long. And we need, I'm going to use a bit of foam. Alright, and then to complete assembly, I need these Perspex sheets. It's together. Should we see if it works? Yeah, I mean, I would say that works. So this was the first version that I built, and although it works, I wasn't very pleased with the build quality. Guess we'll put the other version in, see which I prefer. Yeah. Time to live with it for a bit and see which one I prefer. Thank you for watching and stay safe.